Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher. Welcome to Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear. What you heard during that introduction was Sweetwater's Don Carr and myself playing through the brand new THR100H, a digital amplifier head from Yamaha. The THR100H is a very interesting amp in several respects, not least of which is that it's actually two completely independent heads inside the same chassis. We're playing through a matching 2x12 cabinet, which also splits to be two completely independent 1x12s inside one enclosure. The THR100H is ideal if you really want to tweak your tone, if you want to get in there and decide on all the components that go into making up your tone, and then having those available to you under knobs on the front panel. It's a great way to go for stage, for studio, for rehearsal, and for practice at home. The THR100H is a digital amplifier, as I mentioned, but it actually emulates the components of a tube or a solid-state amplifier. We have a number of different parameters that we can set to achieve the tones that we want. We have several different preamp types on the front panel. We also have 5 completely different emulated tube types on the back, and we can switch the amplifier from Class AB to Class A operation. By combining all those aspects together, you can create a tone that's uniquely yours or emulate the sound of classic amplifiers. We have a lot of onboard functionality. We have a built-in USB port that allows you to access some of the hidden parameters inside the amp. We have 2 XLR line outputs that have speaker emulation. We have a headphone output for silent practice, and you can even load different impulse responses or your own impulse responses into the THR100 and use those with those line outputs to customize the sound of the cabinet that you're playing through. Let's take a quick tour of the amplifier. First of all, on the front panel, we have 2 completely different sets of controls, 2 inputs, and that's because we really do have 2 totally different amplifiers inside this head. So for each of the amps, or each of the channels, if you want to think of them that way, we've got gain, we've got a master level, 3-band EQ, a presence control, a reverb control, and then an output level control that sets the final volume for that amplifier. Each of those channels feeds its own power amplifier section, and there are 2 speaker outputs on the back. We've routed the 2 speaker outputs from those power amplifiers into the speaker inputs on the cabinet, so we really do have 2 completely separate signal paths going here at once. The configuration of the amplifier is very flexible. If we plug into input 1, we can access either of the 2 channels or completely separate amplifiers if you want to think of them that way, and then control what happens with this switch. When the switch is in the up position, coming in input 1 feeds through the top row of controls out of that amplifier and through a tonker speaker on the right-hand side of this cabinet. With the switch in the down position, what's coming in input 1 will be feeding through the bottom row of controls through a totally separate preamp and amplifier. The output from that is coming into the left-hand speaker inside the cabinet, which is an Eminence Legend 1218. And finally, still plugged into input number 1, with the switch in the middle position, we're playing through both channels simultaneously coming out of both speakers. This allows us to do several different things. We could set up the 2 channels as if they're 2 channels on the same amp. So we could set up the same preamp type on the 2 channels, the same power amp type, feed them into the speakers, and sort of use those for a lead rhythm kind of switching. You could also set this up where you have, say, an American clean amplifier on the bottom row of controls and coming out of the Legend 1218, and the top set up for more of a high-gain British sound. That could be coming out through EL84 power tubes or EL34 power tubes, and then routed into the tonker speaker, so you'd really have access to 2 completely different tonalities when you're playing on stage. You can also do what we were doing at the beginning of the video, which is plug 2 completely different guitarists into the 2 inputs. Each one can access their own amplifier type and their own speaker and have both going on simultaneously. It's a very flexible setup. Finally, you could set things up where you're coming into input 1, going out with a stereo effect, coming back into the stereo effects loop, and route the whole thing in stereo. So needless to say, the THR100 is a very flexible amplifier with that dual amp setup and that dual control setup. But where things really get interesting is where we start to combine the different preamp types with the different power tube types and the Class AB and the Class A operation. Let's explore some of those possibilities. Let's begin by looking at the different preamp types, which are selected on the front panel. There are 5 different types available, and they begin with one called Solid, which is a solid-state preamp. It's intended to be very transparent and neutral. So let's switch things over here. So we're playing through channel number 1. We'll set our preamp type to solid state. I'm going to turn my gain back to about 12 o'clock. We'll set the master to about 3 o'clock, and we'll set all our tone controls to about 12 o'clock. I'm playing a Paul Reed Smith Modern Eagle 2 guitar, which has a rosewood neck with PAF style pickups. You can hear that's a very clean, transparent tone. Now we can make that a little bit dirtier. We can push the gain all the way up. And we'll just start to get to the edge of breakup. Now we also have a booster available on each channel. So if we turn that on, bring that up a little bit, we can start to push even that solid state clean sound into a little bit of breakup. Now we'll turn the booster back off, and we'll move up to the clean setting. Now this emulates a tube preamp in an American style amplifier. You can hear that has a little more sparkle on the top end. There's a little bit of a scoop in the lower mid-range. Gives it a nice round bell-like tone. Moving up to the crunch setting, we're going to get a chiming British style amplifier. There's enough gain here on the crunch channel to drive things into a nice singing lead if you want to, but it really works well as a crunching rhythm tone. Our next setting is lead, which is a British style higher gain amplifier. The lead channel has plenty of sustain and plenty of gain for playing leads, but there's also a lot of clarity if you're playing rhythms. It's very touch responsive, so it really responds well to what's happening with your pick. Our final preamp type is the modern type, and this is a higher gain American style amplifier. Plenty of sustain there, plenty of gain there for playing whatever type of lead that you want. Also works well if you're doing heavier rhythm tracks. Now we were listening to all 5 of those preamp types through EL34 power tubes, and we can switch to the different types as well. Let's go back to our clean setting. And we'll change to 6v6 power tubes. And we can go to EL84s. It's a subtle change, but you can hear that the top end opens up. It gets chimier when you're using those EL84s. With the 6v6s, it pushes into distortion just a little bit sooner. It's a little bit more bell-like. Now we'll move down to KT88s. There's a nice punchiness on the bottom end there, a real full mid-range that really jumps out of the speaker. Now we'll go to 6L6s. That has that characteristic top end of a 6L6, a little bit more open in the mid-range, but plenty of bottom end as well. And finally, we'll go back to EL34s. That's a full-sounding tube with warm top end, but a nice tight-sounding bottom end as well, so you get good drive when you're playing rhythm parts. Now we can also configure the power section to be either Class AB or Class A. We've been listening to all these power tubes in Class A so far. Now we'll switch over to Class AB. It's a little different sound. There's not quite the clarity and the bell-like top end on that. A little less dynamics. It's a little bit smoother sounding. Now these changes in the power section are subtle, but they're the kind of things that you can use to really fine-tune your tone as well as fine-tune the response of the amplifier. The amplifier itself sounds very organic. It's like you're playing through a tube amplifier. You would never know you're plugged into a digital instrument. We can also fine-tune our tone by choosing the specific speaker that we want to use inside the cabinet. So far we've been listening to everything through the Tonker speaker, which is a nice warm round-sounding speaker. It works great with overdriven tones. If you'd like a little bit more sparkle, we can go to the Eminence Legend 1218, which is on the left side of the cabinet. And we do that by switching down to the second channel on the amplifier. So let's duplicate our settings and we'll switch between those. All right, so I'm going to go to Class AB with 6L6s. We'll set this to the clean setting, We'll set our gain controls, volume controls, tone controls, about the same here. Master's at the same level. So here's playing through the Tonker, and here's through the Legend 1218. You can hear there's quite a difference in that tone. The two speakers have very different tonalities. And we can fine-tune even further by combining the two together. So we're listening through both speakers with the same amplifier. That gives us a little bigger sound because the two channels are complementing each other, reinforcing certain frequencies, canceling certain frequencies, giving us a really rich composite tone. And we can dial that in by varying the volume levels between the two channels. Now the other thing we can do is set up one channel to be our clean sound and the other to be dirty. So we'll leave our channel 2 as our clean sound, and then we can set up channel 1 as our lead tone. We'll roll some of this down, bring this up, and now we can quickly switch between those. all within the same amp head and the same cabinet. All of the switching functionality of the TH100H can be controlled by the included foot switch as well. So we can use the foot switch to change between channels, channel 1, channel 2, channel 1 plus 2, turning the booster on and off. And whichever channels of the amplifier are set up to have the booster turned on will be turned on when we hit the booster switch. We can also turn the reverb on and off. And we can switch the effects loop in and out. If you're looking for the ultimate in flexible amplifiers that allows you to really dig in and tweak your tone, the THR100H Dual is a great way to go. If you don't need quite that much functionality, you only need a single channel amplifier, you should check out the THR100H Single, which is basically one channel of this amplifier in a chassis. A little bit simpler to operate because there's only one amplifier there. Doesn't give you quite the flexibility, but it still allows you to tweak your tone to the ultimate. I'm really excited about the THR100H. It sounds incredible. You'd never know you're playing through an emulated amplifier. It also feels totally organic. You feel like you're plugged into a tube amp, or in the case of the solid-state preamp, like you're plugged straight into the front of the amplifier. Really is authentic, sounds great, highly tweakable, highly functional, and great for many different scenarios from practicing at home to on stage. To take us out, Don Carr and myself are going to sit down and play through the amplifier simultaneously again, using it as two completely separate amplifiers with two different speakers. We'll be playing at the same time and having some fun. Thanks for joining me for Sweetwater's Guitars and Gear.